Welcome back to another one of our studies in Philippians. Today we'll be looking at Philippians 2:25 to 30. So please listen or follow along as I read. But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. For he longs for all of you and is distressed because you heard he was ill. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore, I am all the more eager to send him, so that when you see him again, you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. So then, welcome him in the Lord with great joy, and honor people like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help you yourselves could not give me. Well, Paul has just talked about Timothy in the previous section. Now he's talking about Epaphroditus. There was a different relationship between Timothy and Epaphroditus. Timothy was like a son. Epaphroditus was like a very valued associate. And we see this by the number of things that Paul says. He calls him a brother, a fellow worker, a fellow soldier, a messenger. And so he's laying on these different types of titles and descriptions because of how important he is. Now, in this, talking about Epaphroditus, he talks in there and he says, he took care of my needs. And that word, that term, take care of my needs, was actually uses the idea of a priestly duty. So this is a wonderful idea that when we as believers help take care of the needs of other believers, it's like the duty of a priest. It is not just friendship, but it has this duty as something rendered to God himself. And that's what Epaphroditus had done. It's really quite a wonderful thing. And he, of course, he calls him a fellow soldier because this whole thing back then and now, we work together in the fight for the Lord. And it is important that we stand with each other. And he talks about Epaphroditus also ministering to him. And this is a word that's rich in meaning. It was used of philanthropists who would give money to support their civic, as a part of their civic duties, to build statues or buildings and so on and so forth. And so he said, he ministered to me. He gave abundantly to me in his service. Now he talks about the situation that happened with Epaphroditus getting sick. Apparently, he left Philippi, he came to Rome, and on the journey, he became sick. Now, back in these days, as it is in many places even now, when you became seriously ill, there was very little chance of recovery. And in fact, people just died. And so when anybody recovered, it was considered to be something quite remarkable. And that was the case here. And of course, when the people back in Philippi heard that Epaphroditus was sick, they kind of assumed this was the end, that they wouldn't see him again. And yet the Lord spared him in a wonderful way. He said that he was distressed. So, of course, why would Epaphroditus be distressed about them being concerned about him? Well, remember, back in these days, communication was very slow. And so by the time the word from Rome reached back to Philippi to tell them that Epaphroditus was sick, weeks would have passed. And then when Epaphroditus finally got well, it would take even more time, more weeks to pass in order to let them know that he was okay. Well, all that time, the people would have been in grief and concern. And so Epaphroditus was distressed, and that talks about intense emotion. It's that distress means it's the same term used for Jesus in Gethsemane when he was sweating great drops of blood. He said that Epaphroditus was that distressed about them being concerned about him. Now, Paul goes on to say that he was sending him back to these people. Now, why was that so important? Well, first of all, because, Paul is there in prison by himself. He's sending Timothy. That's important. And that's a sacrifice for him. And to let Epaphroditus goes means that Paul was even going to be more isolated than he currently was. And so this is again a sacrifice for Paul to send, but he felt it was so important that Epaphroditus carry back all the word about him and all this kind of thing, that he was going to do it because he loved and cared for the Philippians. And he also knew that Epaphroditus was probably homesick because, Philippi was his home, not Rome. Now, he says in the 29th and 30th verse, let me read those again. Welcome him, the Lord, with great joy, and honor him like him, and honor men like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ, risking his own life to make up for the help you could not give me. I want to focus in on this idea of risking. There's a couple of really great things to think about with this. Number one, the name Epaphroditus, it was a pagan name, really, and it was named after the goddess Aphrodite, who, among other things, pretty sordid kind of worship and so on with Aphrodite, but she was also the goddess of gambling. So what Paul is doing here is he's playing on kind of a play on words. Then he's taking the name of Epaphroditus, the one name for Aphrodite, the goddess of gambling. He says he risked everything he's risking his own life to make up for the help. So he's saying, named after the goddess of gambling, here in the name of Christ, he risked everything. And, that's kind of neat, the way the Lord takes, doesn't matter where we started or what we were named after or what was connected with our name in the past. The Lord has a way of turning it around and making it something wonderful. But this idea of risking is the idea of giving himself sacrificially for others. Chuck Swindoll, the great Bible teacher, American Bible teacher, tells a story about one day there was a little boy and his sister was very sick and she needed to have a graft from the boy's bone marrow in order to live. He was the only one that had a match that could be put into her in order for her to recover. And so the parents sat down and explained how sick the sister was to this little boy and said, you're the only one. We need to do an operation and take something and give it to her and she can live. Well, he thought very seriously about it and he said, okay, I'll do it. And so they had the surgery. They took the bone marrow out of him and put it into his sister and she eventually recovered. But after he recovered, they found out that when they explained that to the little boy, he thought it meant he was going to die in order for his sister to live. He didn't understand it was just an operation and that he would also recover. And so in the same way, when we talk about Epaphroditus risking, he risked, like that little boy in his mind, risked his life for his sister's life. And that we, in our service to each other, often have to risk and put ourselves out there, even if it means at our own expense, even if it means that we might lose our own lives, that we give ourselves sacrificially for each other in the name of Christ. Well, that's something for you to think about. And we, especially as we're in this Christmas season, as we think about this great sacrifice that Christ made for us by coming and living in the flesh among us, he risked all for us. And that was our example, and we're to risk all for him. Well, something to think about, and look forward to talking to you more next week about what Paul says in the book of Philippians. God bless you.